Imagine you're standing in an aisle at the grocery store, right? And you're holding two identical-looking bottles of wine.
Okay.
You know absolutely nothing about wine, like zero. One costs $10 and the other costs $40. You're heading to a dinner party, and without even a second thought, you just put the $40 bottle in your cart.
Naturally.
Right. But why? Why did your brain just voluntarily surrender $30 based on zero actual evidence of quality? I mean, you didn't taste it. You didn't read the vineyard's history. You just assumed that a higher price automatically equals higher quality.
Yeah, he took a shortcut.
Yeah, let's go. And welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are hacking into your brain's hidden operating system, basically, to figure out why you make the choices you make.
That wine bottle scenario is, it's actually the perfect illustration of our mission today. We are breaking down the insights from this massive 10-hour, highly acclaimed audiobook. It has a 4.7-star rating. It's Robert B. Cialdini's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion.
Total classic.
Oh, absolutely. And the core objective here is to uncover the psychological triggers that dictate human decisions. We want to explain the actual mechanics of why you automatically say yes in everyday situations, often, completely oblivious to the fact that you're being subtly pushed in that direction.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away, because we usually walk around with this expectation of total control, right? We like to think we are the rational CEOs of our own brains, weighing options, calculating costs, making deliberate choices. But really, our brains are kind of like smartphones running these hidden persuasion apps in the background just to save battery life.
That is a great analogy.
Thanks. And, if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you really need to know that understanding this material isn't just about learning how to sell a product. It's not just for marketers.
Yeah.
It's about giving you the tools to spot when these invisible strings are being pulled on you in sales, in politics, in basic social interactions.
Yeah, because the biological reality of our decision-making, it completely shatters that illusion of the rational CEO. I mean, deep analytical thinking requires an immense amount of caloric energy.
Wait, literally calories, like burning food energy.
Literally calories. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex logic, is just an absolute energy hog. And in a modern world defined by, severe information overload, your brain literally cannot afford the calorie burn of analyzing every single detail of your life.
That makes sense.
If you thoroughly researched every single brand of cereal before buying one, you would starve in the grocery store aisle.
You'd just be standing there reading nutrition labels until you passed out.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
your brain needs a workaround.
So it's essentially an evolutionary survival mechanism. We use these mental shortcuts because the alternative is just complete analysis paralysis.
Precisely that. These mental shortcuts, or heuristics, they act as automatic decision makers. They're triggered by simple, easily recognizable signals in our environment.
Like what kind of signals?
Signals like popularity, expert approval, or urgency. Your brain says, I don't have the energy to evaluate this wine, but it's expensive, and society tells me expensive things are good. Shortcut engaged, decision made.
Okay, but let me challenge that premise for a second. What does this biological hardwiring actually mean for our free will?
That's the big question.
Right. Like, if we are evolutionarily programmed to take these shortcuts instead of analyzing the world logically, are we all just sitting ducks for any marketer or politician who happens to have read this book?
Well, we aren't entirely helpless, but we are highly vulnerable if we remain unaware of it. The real danger is that these shortcuts bypass our critical thinking entirely.
They just slip right past the guards.
Exactly. When a seasoned persuader presents your brain with the right signal, your analytical firewall never even boots up. You just react. So to defend against that, you really have to understand how these shortcuts manifest in the real world.
All right, let's bring this down to a granular level then, starting with our basic one-on-one human interactions. Because we don't live in a vacuum, right? We live in a society built on relationships. And the source material highlights how our natural social instincts are often like the very first things to be weaponized against us.
Yeah, the first major trigger Cialdini talks about is the principle of reciprocity.
The favor trading one.
Right. It's this profound, almost physically uncomfortable obligation we feel to return a favor. And from an evolutionary standpoint, human tribes survived by sharing resources.
Like sharing food.
Exactly. If someone shared meat with you and you didn't reciprocate later, you were ostracized from the tribe, which meant death. So this feeling of obligation is deeply coded into our survival software. The book points out how this manifests today. Like if a colleague helps you with a project, you instantly feel internal pressure to help them later.
But hold on, aren't we just pathologizing basic human kindness here?
How do you mean?
Like if a coworker helps me out, I want to help them back because we're a cooperative social species, right? Not necessarily because my brain has been hacked.
That's a fair point, but there is a vital distinction here between organic social bonds and engineered social obligations.
Okay.
Kindness is organic. What marketers do is engineer a synthetic version of it. Consider the classic example from the text, the free sample at the grocery store.
Oh, I fall for this all the time.
Right. A brand ambassador hands you a small piece of cheese on a toothpick. You didn't ask for it. But the moment you accept it, that ancient survival software boots up.
Because I took the meat, so to speak.
Exactly. You have received a resource, the reciprocity rule is triggered, and suddenly you feel this micro level of social pressure to buy the entire block of cheese. They traded a 5-cent piece of dairy for a $7 purchase just by exploiting your sense of gratitude.
Oh, man. Here's where it gets really interesting, but also kind of sad. So, does knowing this completely ruin the magic of a free sample at a grocery store for you?
It definitely changes the experience. You realize you're confusing a commercial transaction for a social favor.
Yeah, they're not my friend. They're just trying to sell me Gouda.
Exactly. And speaking of friendship, the source text moves from the favors we owe to the people we simply like. It argues that we are so easily persuaded by individuals we relate to.
Which is the liking principle, right?
Yes, the liking principle. And the mechanics of why we like people are surprisingly predictable.
Like what? What makes us like someone automatically?
We are persuaded by attractiveness, by similarity, by people who give us compliments, and by sheer familiarity. There's this cognitive bias known as the halo effect.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, when we see someone physically attractive or highly relatable, our brain automatically assigns them other positive traits. We just assume they are also honest, intelligent, and trustworthy without any supporting evidence.
So if they're pretty, they must be right.
Pretty much.
See, here's where it gets really interesting for the modern consumer. Because the book specifically mentions how influencers promote products to their followers.
Mm-hmm.
And I always assumed people bought influencer merchandise just because they wanted to emulate a lifestyle, you know?
Right.
Like, I want to look like them. But it's actually about familiarity, isn't it?
It's heavily about familiarity. It's about the deeply ingrained parasocial relationships we build online.
Right. Yeah.
You watch an influencer's daily vlog, you see their messy kitchen, you hear their struggles. Your brain's shortcut categorizes them as a friend because of that constant intimate familiarity.
So an influencer giving you a compliment through the screen is basically hacking your brain's friendship code.
Exactly. When they suddenly pitch a skincare product, your brain doesn't process it as a paid advertisement from a stranger. It processes it as a trusted recommendation from a buddy. They bypass your skepticism entirely.
Wow. Okay, so reciprocity and liking work beautifully when someone initiates a transaction or when we feel a personal connection.
Yeah.
But let's pivot the scenario a bit because we aren't always dealing with people we know.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you are totally isolated?
Like in what context?
Imagine you are traveling in a foreign city. You don't know the language, you don't have any friends to rely on, nobody is handing you free cheese, and you are just staring at an empty street trying to find a place to eat. Your internal social cues are useless. Who do you look to then?
Ah, okay. When internal cues fail due to uncertainty, our autopilot looks outward. We look to the masses.
Which is social proof.
Exactly. This brings us to the principle of social proof. This is the heuristic where we decide what the correct behavior is simply by observing what everyone else is doing.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Pretty much. The evolutionary logic is straightforward. The herd usually survives. If the rest of your tribe is suddenly running away from the river, you don't stop to ask why, you just run.
Okay, let me make sure I'm getting this. The examples the text uses for social proof are universally relatable. Like back to that foreign city. You see two restaurants. One is completely empty, and the other has a massive line stretching out the door.
Right.
Instantly, the restaurant with a line appears vastly superior. We just completely outsource our critical thinking to that crowd.
Outsourcing is the perfect word for it. Why expend your limited mental energy evaluating the menu, the decor, and the hygiene of a restaurant when 50 other people have seemingly already done all that hard work for you?
So a long line outside a building is essentially just a physical, real-world 5-star review.
Yes.
We see a line, and our brain says, well, all those people can't possibly be wrong, right? And Obviously, this is the exact same mechanism driving e-commerce.
Absolutely.
Products with thousands of stars and user testimonials just absolutely crush their competition, regardless of whether the product is actually better.
The vulnerability here, though, is that the crowd can be remarkably wrong. Or worse, the crowd can be artificially manufactured.
Like fake reviews.
Exactly. But the shortcut is so automatic that we rarely pause to audit the validity of the crowd itself. We just trust the numbers. However, there are times when there is no crowd to follow.
Right, like an empty street.
Yeah. When the herd is absent, we look up the ladder. We look for authority.
Okay, authority. We have this profound, deeply conditioned instinct to follow advice from experts. The book talks about how doctors recommending medicine or experts appearing in advertisements can completely sway our decisions.
It's really important to understand how early this is conditioned in us. From infancy, obedience to authority, parents, teachers, societal leaders, it's heavily rewarded. And disobedience is punished.
So we learn it fast.
We do. This creates a deeply entrenched heuristic, people in charge know better. But what the source material highlights is a terrifying vulnerability in how our brains process visual cues related to authority.
Yes. This is the part that genuinely unsettled me.
It's wild.
We don't actually require real legitimate authority to be persuaded. The mere symbols of authority drastically increase compliance.
The symbols are enough to shut down the firewall completely.
Just the appearance of it.
Right. A title like doctor or professor placed before a name, a well-tailored business suit, a framed credential on a wall, or most potently, a uniform.
It's incredible how easily the brain is tricked by a costume.
It really is. The brain doesn't stop to verify the medical degree of the person in the lab coat on the television commercial. The visual cue of the white coat triggers the authority heuristic immediately. The shortcut says, they're in charge, they possess expertise, I must comply.
Wow. Okay, so we've explored the external pressures, we've talked about the social glues of friends and favors, and we've talked about outsourcing our thinking to the crowd and the experts.
Right.
But the final two principles outlined in the review don't rely on the outside world at all, do they? They exploit our internal psychology.
Yeah, these last two are perhaps the most insidious because they trap the decision maker using their own internal identity and their perception of time. Let's look at commitment and consistency.
I found this one fascinating. The principle argues that once we make a choice or take a stand on an issue, we face this immense psychological pressure to behave consistently with that original commitment.
It comes down to cognitive dissonance. Human beings crave internal consistency.
We don't want to feel like hypocrites.
Exactly. If our external actions contradict our internal beliefs, or if our current actions contradict our past actions, we experience genuine psychological discomfort. It feels bad.
So we double down.
We do. The text explains that if someone publicly supports a cause, even with something as small as signing a petition, they become significantly more likely to continue supporting it, even if the circumstances drastically change.
The review points out how marketers build entire sales funnels around this need for consistency. Like, they never ask for the massive purchase right up front.
Never.
They ask for a tiny, almost insignificant commitment first, like sign up for a free newsletter, create an account, just give us your email.
That is the classic foot-in-the-door technique.
Right.
Because small commitments predictably cascade into larger ones.
Because of that consistency trap.
Right. Once you say yes to a small request, your brain subconsciously rewires its self-image to maintain consistency. You start thinking, oh, I am the type of person who engages with this company. It literally traps your future self based on a minor action taken by your past self.
Man, that's wild. So if consistency traps your future self, the final principle traps you right in the present moment. Right? Scarcity.
The ticking clock.
Yes. We inherently value things significantly more when they are limited, rare, or about to disappear.
Scarcity triggers a phenomenon known as loss aversion. Psychologically, the pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
Twice as powerful.
Yeah. So when you see a sign that says, only 2 items left in stock, or sale ends at midnight, it creates an immediate physiological panic.
The fear of missing out. FOMO. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere, and it completely overrides your rational assessment of the product's actual utility. The brain stops asking, do I actually need this item? And instead prioritizes, I must secure this scarce resource before it vanishes.
The pure urgency?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Scarcity threatens your current self by eliminating your freedom of choice in the future.
Okay, so think about this. Let me ask you about a scenario where these tactics overlap, because I see this all the time.
Sure.
Think about those software companies that offer a 30-day free trial, right?
Mhm.
But it requires your credit card up front, and then it automatically turns into a paid subscription if you don't cancel.
Oh, yeah. Very common.
Are they using the commitment trap by getting that first small yes with the card?
Or is it reciprocity because they gave you a month of free software? Or is it like a psychological double whammy?
It is absolutely a double whammy. In fact, it's a deliberate layering of multiple principles. The most sophisticated persuasion campaigns don't rely on just one trigger.
They stack them.
They stack them. The
Okay.
free software is reciprocity.
Yeah.
You feel a subtle obligation because you've been using their tool. Entering your credit card is a micro-commitment, aligning your identity with their service.
Right.
And if they tell you the free trial offer is only valid for the next 24 hours, well, they've just injected scarcity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, your brain is dealing with 3 simultaneous background apps draining its analytical battery.
Which makes it almost impossible to think clearly in the moment. You're just overwhelmed.
Precisely. Okay, so having mapped out all 6 of these psychological triggers, reciprocity, liking, social proof, authority, commitment, and scarcity, how does a 10-hour audiobook actually structure all of this? Like, how could you practically apply it to your life today?
Well, the review highlights 4 primary domains where this knowledge is typically applied. First, marketing, which is the most obvious understanding how businesses increase conversions and sales.
Sure.
Second, negotiation. When you understand the mechanics of influence, you gain a massive upper hand in navigating business discussions and contracts.
That makes sense.
Third is leadership. Effective managers use these principles not to deceive people, but to motivate teams and drive organizational alignment. And finally, personal awareness.
Which is basically using it as a self-defense manual against manipulation.
Exactly. The book functions as a dual-purpose tool. It teaches you the mechanics of influence. You can utilize them ethically in your professional life, but it also trains you to recognize when they are being deployed against you.
And the format seems really well suited for that. The review mentions that the audiobook is highly accessible, like it avoids dry academic jargon and instead relies heavily on real-world experiments, historical storytelling, and just highly practical examples.
It's very engaging.
However, the review did note a few weaknesses. It mentioned that the book focuses heavily on technique rather than deep psychological theory, and that some concepts tend to repeat across different chapters.
It is a valid critique if you're approaching the book as an academic. Like, if you want a dense neurological textbook on the prefrontal cortex, this will disappoint you. It's designed to be highly tactical.
But regarding that repetition,
Yeah.
the review mentioned it as a negative. But for the person listening to our deep dive right now, isn't that repetition exactly what you need to train your brain to actually spot these triggers in the wild? Like, isn't it a feature rather than a bug?
That is a very astute observation. To override an automatic evolutionary shortcut in your brain, you have to develop conscious pattern recognition.
Right.
And the only way human beings build pattern recognition is through repetition.
You have to see it over and over.
Exactly. Hearing how reciprocity works when a waiter brings you a mint with your check, and then seeing how it works in a car dealership, and then recognizing it in a corporate boardroom, that repetition is what finally allows you to see the underlying architecture of persuasion.
You start to see the code of the matrix everywhere you look,
Yes.
which totally explains why this is considered a definitive must-read text for entrepreneurs. It demystifies human behavior. Influence isn't random. It follows highly predictable, heavily researched patterns.
And once you internalize those patterns, you transition from being a passive passenger in your decision-making process to an active, critical observer.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the journey we've taken today. We've discovered that our daily decisions are heavily influenced by our brain's desperate need to conserve mental energy. To survive information overload, we rely on predictable shortcuts. Reciprocity makes us feel obligated to return favors. Liking makes us say yes to people we relate to or find attractive. Social proof forces us to follow the herd when we are uncertain. Authority makes us blindly obey symbols of expertise. Commitment traps us in a cycle of trying to remain internally consistent. And scarcity drives us into a panic with the ticking clock.
That's all 6.
Understanding these 6 triggers gives you a massive advantage in navigating both the marketplace and your personal life.
It equips you to actually pause, recognize the trigger, and deliberately choose whether to comply or walk away.
I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden forces shaping your everyday decisions. The next time you're, browsing online, walking through a grocery store, just scrolling past an influencer, Keep an eye out for those limited time only signs, the suspiciously long lines, and of course, the free pieces of cheese.
Yeah, watch out for the cheese. And as you begin noticing these tactics everywhere, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
We've discussed this book as a vital self-defense manual for the modern consumer, but consider this: if awareness of these 6 psychological triggers becomes completely universal.
Like everyone knows them.
Right, if everyone learns how to perfectly protect themselves from them, will these evolutionary shortcuts eventually stop working? Or will persuaders and marketers simply be forced to invent a completely new psychological language of influence just to bypass our updated mental firewalls?
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating and honestly somewhat terrifying question.
Yeah.
Will the background apps always find a way to run?
It's something to think about.
Definitely. Well, until next time, keep your analytical firewall updated and don't let anyone hack your brain's battery saver.